Look at that. We jumped right into it.
Hey,
So much into it. I don't even know what I'm doing right now. Let's see.
we never know what you're doing, Steven.
Can you even hear me? How about this? Oh no, you can't.
I hear you, but can they hear you?
I don't know. Oh yeah, you can hear me.
I can hear you.
I know. I'm looking at the wrong
I think they
mic.
can hear you because I put it on to see and I heard
there you
you
go.
from the stream.
So
So welcome everyone to Roll for Combat Live.
yes. And there we go. Yeah, it's just Mark and I. We couldn't find someone because after the Kickstarter ended on Friday, I collapsed. I basically said no more, and that was it. I was so tired. Oh my god, these Kickstarters, it's so funny. Everyone always says it doesn't matter how many you do, but they are really brutal. They are so brutal. But for those who don't know, we're talking about the Eldamon, Battle Zoo, Year of Monsters, Strange and Unusual card battling game. Everything just ended on Friday. Did really well. Now we got to work on it. I actually think working on it is easier than doing the Kickstarter.
Really, it is. Marketing is tough, and it's not my original skill set. I'm learning a lot, but it's challenging.
Yes.
And even if you just say, oh, it shouldn't be that challenging, even like the number of words you have to produce for marketing is high volume compared to like some other things. I mean, yeah, sure, it's easier to write words that are just conversational than like a book of rules, but you need to write a lot of them when you're marketing.
It's so much work, but it is done for now. Now we actually have to do the work. And for those of you who want to do a late pledge, there will be a late pledge option at battlezoo.com in the very near future. We have to wait for everything to process. It takes about 2 weeks, and then I can start setting up late pledges and pre-orders. So if you're watching this later, which you are because the Kickstarter's done, so you have to be watching this later, then you can go to Battlezoo. And if it's really later, you can just order them. They won't even be pre-orders. They'll just be orderable. That will be it.
For the people who are watching this in like 2023.
Yes. Elder Wrap when? Oh yeah, when is the Elder Wrap?
Well, so Steven, to make the Elder Wrap, the things that we need to do for certain is we need to have all 160 plus of the Eldamon, and we need them to be all named. At which point, like, I might as well like do the Elderdex entries for at least a third of them, because I can do it for like, say, all the pet forms or something like that. So once we know what all the Eldamon are and they're all named, then we can arrange it into a wrap and do the little music video of it.
Yep.
So it's going to take a little bit.
Yeah.
I would expect to see the play test of the Eldamon befriending and like finding and collection rules much sooner than that, because that text is ready as soon as Steven gets some time to lay it out.
Yeah.
And we did say in the Kickstarter that would be like kind of just after.
Yeah.
And that's because we
next few weeks.
We have that in advance.
Yep. It'll come out in a few weeks. And by the way,
everyone, just what that includes is all the rules you need to find and befriend Eldamon, but they don't have rules for like fighting or like mechanical abilities that the Eldamon do, because we need to first play test that the rules for just finding them actually work and are easy to use in your game. Want you guys to help us tweak that out. That's super core, because if you can't befriend them easily, and if that doesn't work for your game, then all the rest kind of hinges on it.
So we have a couple of different play tests, and looks like some people are already asking questions. Don't forget, if you do a super chat, we'll answer your question immediately. If you join the channel and, well, ever ask us anything, we'll always answer it. And do like and subscribe for those of you new, because we do this every week, more or less. We rarely miss a week, actually, now I think about it. Last week we did it 4 times. 5 or 6 if you include your own streams. So
that's true.
So we did a lot. But The question is, we have a couple here. Are there any stretch goals beyond Centaur that we didn't get to see? Yeah, there was like 30, 50.
There are a lot. We had
There's a
ideas. We worked together and we looked at it. We budgeted it for the time and the resources it would take.
Yeah.
And at almost every amount of money that we could think of, we figured out what our stretch goals would be. And we had some plans to do other stretch goals that weren't just based on total value, but that got too complicated. And that is why we did a rush where we decreased the stretch goals for a little while of how much each one was. But yeah, we had plans, just because you never know with a Kickstarter what's going to happen. I mean, last time there was definitely no expectation that it would get so close to 300,000, whereas this time we knew that it probably would, and it did. So we wanted to make sure we were ready just in case, and that we knew where we would put those resources to make more things. But we can just put those stretch goals in new books the next time we do a Kickstarter.
We had $1 million stretch. We had stretch goals going just pretty far, just in case, because
it went a little bit.
Trust me, it got pretty weird towards the end there, because even we were just making up stuff. But it
was like the special promo cards,
cards just for things like that. And we. But you never know, because you'd rather have it prepared.
240 Eldamon instead of 160.
It got pretty crazy, but it's tricky. It's tricky because if you have, it's hard to do stretch goals. Some people do them constantly. Some people do them every 100,000. Some people do them every 5,000. It's all over the place. We're trying to figure out the balance, at least for our audience, because last time I had a lot, but it was things for like stickers and such, and then people didn't love them. So then we changed it to things like, okay, we'll write dragons and do all this stuff. But you know what? That was a lot of work. In fact, we did the stretch goals without really thinking it through, and now still playing catch up. So I'm now trying to do the stretch goals that we're not going crazy. And then in terms of playtests, well, you say playtest material, but there's a lot of playtests, because there'll be the playtest for the Battles of Eldamon, Eldamon Battles card game. There'll be a playtest. Well, the public playtest for capturing them is coming out in just a few weeks, and that will work with anyone. And how that works is that capture and befriend them. How you can befriend them is that will work in any game, anytime. So you can just play. It doesn't even matter. It could be Starfinder, Pathfinder.
It is rules agnostic.
Anything.
You could add it into your Powered by the Apocalypse game.
You can add it to your game of tic-tac-toe if you really wanted to. You could be watching Jeopardy.
Tic-tac-toe would be a little difficult.
You can be watching Jeopardy at home and start befriending Eldamon. That's how agnostic it is.
That's a little rough. Like if you were doing tic-tac-toe, you could, and it's hilarious that you could, but you'd have to use the non-elementally associated table. Right. Every time, because your game of tic-tac-toe is never going to be associated with an element.
That's right.
And so it wouldn't be testing the full system very well if you were only testing with tic-tac-toe. So we would appreciate it if you tested it with but if you tested it with a board game like Spirit Island or something that has elements in it, is it related to an RPG? No, but then you can at least test the elements.
It would work. So there's that. There's the Ancestries, which, believe it or not, are going through playtesting right now. Some of them. This goes to
we're doing a very early close look just at a few of them, because the idea is all of the Ancestries, when we release them as a PDF, it's going to be open to all the backers. We're going to have a stream like this one, but private to all backers that have backed your monsters. You come in, you talk to us, tell us what you like in the PDF, what's missing, what should be added or changed. So that's almost like not just a playtest, but a design workshop where you get to be in a workshop with us and talk about professional game design in a behind the scenes way. So that's kind of the more open playtest, open to backers, at least for your monsters, is done through the PDFs. But we're doing some early phase with like some very trusted folks that are looking at them before that, just to make sure, and then there's going to be a card game playtest, like Steven said. Eventually that's going to be very open to backers. And then Steven, I'm assuming that we will do like potentially, like we did last time, a quasi open where we do a call, but select some number of people from that for anything other than the ones that we've announced to be open.
Yeah, there's a lot. Don't worry, they're all coming.
Oh, there's plenty.
We just finished it like 3 days ago, so you got to give us a little break here, buddy. It's like there's a lot going on, and I won't get into what we're working on, but we have a lot of stuff. There's too much going on right now. I need a break.
Yeah, you should take a little bit of a break. Just let me. I can just keep work on things. You take a little break. But I guess probably finish Indigo Isles first.
Well, that was part of what I was saying. It's that we are actually we have a lot of it in there, and actually now we're fine-tuning it, and now I'm actually enough that I'm starting to release pages, at least layouts of pages as you've seen, so it's starting to get close, like pretty close. Hopefully we'll have that released. I'm going to do it in parts. I'm
incredibly excited.
Yeah, it's going to be done in parts. And in terms of the Foundry module, I'm actually talking to, I don't know how I find these people. I found the guy who did the Foundry modules for Paizo, who did Punks in a Powder Keg and all those. He did all the Alkenstar adventure paths for Foundry VTT, and those things are dynamite. So he's going to probably do ours. So how about that? You didn't even know that, Mark. How about that?
I actually didn't. I know that we had some of the Foundry devs that do Pathfinder 2 volunteer dev for some of the rules stuff. I did not know that you found the one for the adventure. That's good.
Literally is doing the adventure paths for Paizo. It's the same guy.
And those are really well done.
I know.
So I'm very excited about that.
I know. We get nothing but A+ people here, man. It's like, I don't even know how I find these people.
You use your that's one of your Glicker superpowers.
It actually is one of my abilities to find like the people.
Find the people.
It's weird. It actually is weird. Even I'm like get weirded up by it once in a while. So
speaking of Indigo Isles,
the main reason we're here. Yes.
Let's maybe transition into why everybody is doing D&D maps wrong, because
everyone.
That was something interesting that I heard from you, Stephen, even though I worked in the industry.
You're all doing them wrong. And feel free to ask your questions. And don't forget to like. We get 50 likes. We're going to do something weird. I don't know what we're going to do. Because normally I make the guest, but now we're each the guest.
Yeah, we're going to have to do weird voices instead of making Derek do it.
So, all right. I actually threw together a very quick example. Let's see if I got the right one up here of how people are doing maps wrong. So when I was working on Jewel of the Indigo Isle, and I was working with like pros beyond pros, and the way it works is that they submit their maps to me, and then I review them. And the most common thing that I found, and here's an example I'm bringing up, is the maps. I'm going to go through a lot of things. But the number one thing that I see in maps at first is that they are too small and they're not, quote, lived in. Because the point of a map is usually it's a battle map, okay? There's maps in terms of a town map, and that's something different. Like town maps and world maps I'm not talking about. We're specifically talking about battle maps here. And I see battle maps all the time because I run a lot of games, but I'm also on VTTs. And unlike some people, I've been on VTTs for over 10 years, I think like 12 years. And I often will set up the scenes myself. I don't pre-buy them. So I have to make sure everything fits into these maps. And recently I was running Agents of Edgewatch, and there's a place you go into. It's kind of like a thieves' den. And the thieves' den is so small that not only is there no room to fight, but they you couldn't even fit the monsters that they listed in the rooms, to the point that when I did get the Roll20 VTT module, the monsters are just like outside the room. Because I was like, wow, there's literally like 2 large creatures and 2 regular sized creatures in like a 10 by 10 room. There's nowhere to fit them. It's like there's literally, you can't even move the door in, and this is a problem. And so here's an example of, and it's a little bit of a spoiler, but not a major spoiler, of one of the adventures. I won't say which one, in Jewel of the Indigo Isles. So the map on the left, and it's supposed to be a it's a, I won't say what it is. It's a livable house where people live. Okay. And this is the second floor. And then if you see on the first, you see on the one all the way on the left, that's what was given to me. And I went through it and I said, okay, first of all, there's a lot of issues with this map. Let's take a look. If you look on the left side, they have the wall for the stairs in between the columns for the grids. So look at that. That's actually a mistake in the map. That means whoever did this, and I won't name names, drew the bottom part of the map without drawing the top part. And then suddenly it would be weird to have a hallway that's 5 feet wide and then 10 feet wide. So instead he split the difference and made a 15-foot hallway. You don't do that, okay? There's a lot of reasons why you don't do that, but just don't start changing the size and widths of your hallways, okay? Especially to 15 feet, okay? Keep them within sorry, that's not 15 feet, 7.5 feet. 7.5 feet. It just messes things up. The other thing is that this is supposed to be a house. Okay. There's a famous quote that people always say that there's no bathrooms on the Starship Enterprise. Well, guess what? There's no bathrooms in Pathfinder or D&D either. Whenever I see a bathroom on a map, it always makes me happy because that's real, man. Like, you should make it look like a real house. So this is this house. It has 4 bedrooms, 5 beds, no bathrooms. Really? Really? Okay, it's not even an outhouse. It's just like, this is it. So, it should feel realistic. And not only that, where are the windows? Like, a look at the one on the left. There's no windows. It's just walls. It's walls with rooms, no bathroom. And none of that. The balcony in the top is actually a problem because one of the big bads is in that main bedroom, L4. And you can, in theory, skip. And because if I'm a PC and I see a balcony, I'll probably climb up to that balcony and go backwards. And this is a sort of a linear progression. You're supposed to go from L1 to 2 to 3 to 4, but you can go backwards. You can go from L4 and then back down. Now, that's not always a bad thing, but for my intents and purposes and for this adventure, it is a bad thing. So that's just off the top of my head. You can see how many things that I have issues with this map.
Yeah, those are smaller things.
Yeah, these are small things. I'm not even getting to the big ones.
There's one that is hard to notice, or it was hard to notice for me. It was surprising for me that this map doesn't quite have, but that it came up a ton of times in Indigo Isles. Do you have any examples of that, or do you want to describe it just aloud?
Which one?
The one about the scope of the map and the approaches.
I don't know which one you're talking about.
Just like, so here, this is the thing I found very interesting that Stephen brought up from a usability perspective, which was a lot of maps that you find in tabletop RPG books and your D&D and Pathfinder books are going to include an encounter area. It's on a grid. It's got a really interesting area in there. It's got everything you want about that interesting location. But the map will start like right when you get to the good part. When you get to the interesting location. And where the monsters are and where all this interesting terrain is. But the problem that Stephen identified that I was like, oh yeah. And even some of like major industry veterans who've gone through many, many adventures still, had the map looking like this. And I hadn't realized this was an issue, but Stephen addressed it from usability. I had just kind of used the maps and been like, oh no, I guess this doesn't work. I'll just put my people like off the map by a little bit, or I would pull out a different blank map and just draw some more extra to it. And I just like fixed it and didn't think of the fact that there's a problem with the map is that it doesn't have anywhere for you to approach it. And it doesn't even explain what it looks like to approach it in a way that might include information you need in terms of visibility, like where the PCs turn so they could see this, like what's the first moment they see this giant like Greek style columns and a giant monster in there. Like it might have been 100 feet away.
I was gonna say, there's so many things we can go through. This one I just literally threw together like 5 minutes before we started the stream.
But I think that's the one that I found like the most compelling as something that was just repeatedly done. Because like sometimes maps do have the bathroom and the windows. This one didn't.
Oh no, yeah, definitely.
A lot of times
definitely.
they're missing it. But almost never do they actually take into account the approach and getting that outside area, the sort of more negative space. And there's a reason for that, which is that when you're in publishing and you're publishing your map in a book, you have to, there are like a few set sizes that you're supposed to go with. And sometimes getting the negative space that you need puts it at not one of those sizes that you would normally use. And similarly, you might be overly focused on the positive space, on the area. It's like, oh, we need this, we need that. And it takes a perspective, I guess, like yours, Stephen, where I was using maps not on a virtual tabletop when I was using them at all, because I do theater of the mind. And so I'll put you off the map. But I think the reason that it stuck in your craw and stood out to you for more years, and that you were able to vocalize it, even though some people in the industry hadn't been able to put their finger on it, was because you used VTTs for longer than most people. And in VTTs, you can't just exactly put someone off the map if the file is the
not
map.
Easily, correct.
You'd have to create black space or something like that, and then
I have to do it all the time. Like I'm always like I'm literally redoing the maps, and then I'm quickly like going in and adding and like literally making new sections.
You would have had to know to do that in advance, so it would have stood out to you. Whereas I would be like, oh wait,
right? When you're 100%. When I used to draw these, when you draw them, it's you have as much space, and I think that has to do with it. It's just that it's between the fact, I think what happened is in the old days, people would just make maps of just the area they needed, and then when you drew it, because 99% of the time I would just draw maps. You would just draw it, and then you have all that extra space around. And let's just say you buy a flip map. Let's say you even buy a flip map from Paizo. Well, great. You get the flip map, which are beautiful and have they go right to the edge, which is fine. You take that map, you slap it down. It's a 5x5, 1-inch grid. You could just extend it. But when you're buying these,
you put another flip bed under it and draw a little bit with your marker or something.
Yeah, it's very easy. But when you are on VTT and it goes right to the edge, unless you're really good at VTTs, you're going to be going in, changing the size of the map, repositioning everything, and making sure like you have space on the sides. And I have to do that a lot. So I'm very cognizant of the sides. Now, the other reason is that some cartographers charge per square. So it gets expensive. It's actually weird. Cartographers, like when it comes to pricing, cartographers are kind of all over the place. Some just charge by the size, and that would be like a quarter page, third of a page, half a page, full page, things like that.
That's generally the most common in the industry.
That's the most standard, although some of them, I'd say about 20-30% do charge by the square, which I guess also works because it makes sense, because like there's a lot of squares, a lot of map, it takes them a long time. And that's another reason why you might not have as much negative space. The other thing is that when you're printing the maps, it's a catch-22, because the bigger and more detailed the map, the smaller it is on a printed item.
That's
so
right.
When we did ours, and you can see like this, by the way, this what you see, this is maybe 1/16 of this map. It is a tiny portion of this map, because our maps are insanely detailed. In fact, when 25 North is on the stream, they know, they've seen the maps. They are ridiculous how many squares we have on them. And I will print them as big as possible in the book, but it's definitely designed heavily for VTT or printout use, or designed to take full advantage of the electronic media. That is something I did do on purpose. One of the reasons
you get the virtual assets, even if you didn't order the VTT. Generally,
we do that on general. So anyhow, back to this map. So then the second one, the one in the middle, was then me going back to the author and also just see how much space there is. So like if you're supposed to have a fight in room L4, look at that room. Okay, you walk in and you go right into a bed. And then there's like one square. There's nowhere for you to fight. There's nowhere. The original. Yeah, in the original, there's just nowhere to fight. And I always say, imagine you have 5 characters at the minimum. And I say 5 because usually, you have to work at least for 5 because that's 4 and then maybe a companion, like a pet or something. And really, you should work for 6 PCs, no problem. No problem. And I'm looking at this map. I'm like, okay, if there's going to be 6 PCs and a monster, or 2 or 3, all the way on the left, where do they stand? Like, where do you put them? Like, there's literally not enough room, and then it becomes really frustrating. So then with the middle map, you can see how we did it. First, we added bathrooms just to make it a little bit more livable. It also adds to the suspense because, like, you walk in, oh, there's a door to your left, 2 doors to your left. Okay, you open the first one. What's in there? Bathroom. Oh, okay. Go to the next door. What's in there? Okay, it's a bedroom. Okay, go to the next one. Oh, it's a bigger bedroom. Oh, okay, go to the bottom one on the left side. Okay, you can go to the north or the south. Well, one of these is going to be it. And then you open it up, and then there is something in these rooms I won't spoil. But then you say, okay, the big fight is in the north, in the L4. Well, look at that. Now we have a nice area. You have a big amount of space. Look at that, 15 feet across, as opposed to before it was like 5 by 10. That literally was like the fighting area. And then even the area to the left was a 10 by 20. So now we have a big area. Not huge, but more than enough to accommodate everyone. And then the fight will take place most likely in that large L-shaped area on the left side. So suddenly now you have enough room to actually put in everyone and actually do something. And then the L5 bathroom, well, let's just say we did something with that one too, just for fun. And that also can be used strategically. But it's such a small difference. Like, you can barely see. Like, if you look at the difference between the map on the left and the map on the right, it's like, I don't even see that much of a difference. Well, there is a difference. The map on the left is much bigger, even though it looks similar. It has a lot more space for fights, and it also just has a more realistic layout. And then for the landing, even though he did make it, he used the correct layout this time. Instead of making the hallway 7.5 feet wide, it's a 5 foot by 5 foot hallway. The stairs go up 10 feet. That's fine. And you can see how the artist rendered it. And we have things like windows. I got rid of the balcony, so you can't go in through you can't go through into the adventure backwards. Made it a little bit more realistic. And now it's a more realistic map in terms of both layout, design, and also fighting. So the master bedroom's as big as your 2-bedroom apartment. Well, keep in mind, people take up a lot of space in the world of D&D and Pathfinder. 5 by 5 is quite a bit of space. So this is what I mean. So what can you take away from this? If you're doing your own maps and there's going to be a fight, can you fit 6 PCs and a monster and room to maneuver in there? And if you can't, that's okay, but is there a reason? Like, I've had fights that are down corridors, or fights that you want to be linear, and that's like part of the challenge. That's okay, that's cool. But if you're going to be doing, these very narrow hallways, I feel like people always make maps too small. That it's because it's hard to visualize negative space. As you were saying, it's hard to visualize nothing, but you always want to have more space than not, especially if you're making your own maps. And those are the biggest things I see always, is that there's never enough space for these fights, and then it becomes really, really bad. I'm talking a lot here, Mark. Why don't you say something?
No, I think you're right about that issue, and I just found it very interesting that I hadn't noticed it until you pointed it out as being an issue, and I was like, yeah, and that has affected me when I'm drawing my maps. I had to draw more than was on them, and I just did not think about it. But with VTTs becoming only more popular as time goes on, it's just going to continue to be an issue. And even the top companies making the best maps, and these maps have evolved and advanced so far since the beginning of D&D. They're much better in a lot of ways in terms of like the details, but some of these issues that you're pointing out, especially with the use of space, are still have not been solved partially because of the competing goals of like saving page space. And so I think it's really cool that Indigo Isles was just like, you know what? Budget be damned. We're going to have what?
I don't know about that. In retrospect, budget sort of be damned. How about that? Sort of be damned.
Budget be half damned.
Partially damned.
The half damn house of budget.
There you go.
But just gonna get out the space, gonna increase the size of all the maps, and gonna do this for GM usability first and foremost. And it's an interesting example of doing it differently, and I am really eager to see GMs playing and running with it and see if you notice the difference on the maps, because maps are something I usually don't notice because they're just kind of something that's going along and I just deal with them on the fly. So if people actually step out and are like, I've noticed these maps are making things easier for me.
If you have any questions about maps in any way, shape, or form, let me know. I don't see anything, but because we're getting a whole bunch of people. Once again, if we get 50 likes, we're going to do something silly. Actually, we'll probably get 50 likes pretty easily. We're halfway there. So so let me say a couple other things. Again, I didn't have time to kind of quickly through this topic together, and I don't want to start running through my drive and pulling up maps that I might not want to show people yet.
Yeah,
there's a lot of spoilers. But the one thing I did notice constantly with maps, okay, let's go through all the things. First of all, there wasn't enough space for combat. That's number one. Not enough space for combat. Number two, not enough space for the monsters. Sounds weird, but I've seen more maps.
It's all about space for combat, space approaching, space for the monsters, space.
Right. Third is space. It's
like there's this one little thing that everybody's doing wrong. It's space. It's the use of space.
Yeah, people are not giving enough space. Those are the items I would say are the top three. They're all related to space. The approach is also important in the sense that if you have everything within a dungeon, then you don't have to worry about the approach. But many times you don't. Many times you have something that occurs at a house or in a barn or at a hotel or on the beach. It could be any of these things. You really need space to have the approach. And Mark saw this with the third set of maps for the third adventure, because there's a lot of open space in that adventure without getting into spoilers. And some of these maps were just focused and centered on just where the encounter was. And then we redid the maps and made the maps like this big, and the encounter area is this area. So it's like there's a lot of approachability. And you got to be a little careful with that. And I'll tell you why is that some spells have a range of 500 feet, and I don't want to get, and also you can crash your VTTs. Like I actually did a map that was 1,000. You know what it was? It was the arena. It was the arena in Agents of Edgewatch. It is 1,000 feet by 500 feet wide. And I put it in accurately. And you know what I learned? When people have a 20-foot move speed, that arena's way too big. It might take them 5 minutes to get across that thing. I was like, wow, people really can't move very fast. So that's something else. You have to give them space, but don't give them too much space, because we did something where I gave them something like 300 feet. No, it was like 400 feet. And you know what they said? They said, there's something wrong on this map. Why do we have all this space before it leads to the temple? What's going on? And of course it was trapped. And of course there were bombs and snares underneath the ground. But so what did they do? They flew over it, because they knew. It's almost telegraphed, almost, It's like, so you got to be careful with that. That's why I actually gave him too much space. There you go.
Just do that like 20 times. And
well, that's too much space.
Have it not be trapped. And then they use all their flying.
I know, but that is the balance. Like, it's too much space. So you want to give enough space so that they approach and that they have room to breathe. But you don't want to give them too much space, because then it will be, okay, I roll for combat. I start my combat. We're 500 feet away from each other. And then I literally have to spend 5 rounds just getting up to melee range before anyone could do anything. And I've done that too, where it's just like, okay, everyone moves, and everyone's just like moving and then moving and then moving and then moving. And then it actually makes the PCs upset, because if they cast anything with a time limit on it, then they get pissed because they're using up their time limit. They're like, crap, it took me 30 seconds just to get up to here, and now I only got like 4 rounds left on my haste. So you got to be careful with that. Other things with the maps is realism. As I said, I don't think you have to go crazy, in the sense that if you have a house, you don't need to have every type of room you would have in a house. But I don't know how many times I've run encounters and where they'll say, okay, let's go check out the roof, or let's go check out the basement. And they expect that to be in there, or closets. They want to see, they're thinking you have a frame of reference. Like if you're making a dungeon and there's no bathrooms in the dungeon, okay, well, no one has a reference of what a dungeon looks like, but everyone has a reference of what a house looks like. So whenever I see these maps with houses that literally have rooms and that's it, it's like, okay, where's the bathrooms? Where's the closets? Where's the kitchen? Like, you need to have sort of the basic fundamentals within a house for it to be realistic. And also, it will help if they're exploring, for them to check off these items in their head. Like, oh, okay, here's the foyer, here's the den, here's the kitchen, the bedrooms are probably upstairs, there's probably a basement downstairs. Like, it's important to have these things. Not only is it more realistic, but you can then also hide or put specific things in those rooms. We're running, again, Agents of Edgewatch has this house they're in, and there's a weird room that has like bars and stuff in it, and it's just almost like a prison in the middle of a house. And again, who has a prison in the middle of the house? So there's no reference to this. There's nothing to reference in real life for this thing. Again, there's reasons in the adventure, but and then also, yeah, someone asks right now, if when most people have outhouses in the setting. Yeah, you could definitely have an outhouse, but put it on the map. Okay, I've actually done that many times. I have outhouses all the time on my maps, but make sure you use it, because that's something that you can use. And of course, the oldest trick in the book is that you have treasure in the outhouse. And I don't mean in the outhouse, I mean down there in the outhouse. That's by far the oldest trick back in D&D first edition. You would always
it's pretty constant. And not only is it the oldest trick, it is literally the oldest trick in Pathfinder, even before Pathfinder was a game system, because Burnt Offerings Pathfinder 1 did that. So, and
Jana B says closets are not common. That's right. In fact, there's no closets in this, but there are wardrobes if you're looking at this house here. So you don't need closets, but you should make sure that when you put in the rooms and you describe them, it's a good example. I'm sure lots of people have played games like Dwarf Fortress, which I play a lot, or you play RimWorld, another fantastic game. And in those games, you're making bases, and the size and what's in the room will determine the happiness of your colonists. So if your room is really small, and if we make a really tiny room with like a little light and just a bed, it's an ugly room. But eventually, if you make the room big and you make it 5x5 and you give them a king size bed and you put some furniture in there and then you make it gorgeous, then suddenly they're much happier. That is probably, do you play those games, Mark? Do you play a Dwarf Fortress type games, base building type games?
No, usually not.
Okay. Yeah. If anyone's out there, I would recommend RimWorld, by the way. Oh, that's a good game. And that just came out for, I think, the consoles. That will teach you a lot about map making, because you literally have to build a base, and you will learn placement of bedrooms, placement of food, placement of entertainment, of power, of defenses. Those builder games
a lot more than I do.
Yeah, it really helps, because there's a mathematical formula. So if you're doing it wrong, the game will tell you you're doing it wrong. And I find those are really useful to get your map making skills down. We almost got 50 likes. Keep up the likes. I know we're getting there.
We're gonna have to talk about maps in weird voices if we do that.
Okay, and someone wrote Polar Bear Bar. I like that name. Favorite maps are those with combat elements built in, like in here that there's a fireplace and someone could like use it to make hot coals and dynamic elements. Definitely. That's not an accident, by the way. You actually can use parts of the map, and you can actually use the coals if you wanted in the fight. That's part of it. So that is a thing. So good call there.
Yeah,
So,
good eye looking at that.
Yeah, and that's not a mistake, by the way. That's actually even in the picture in the actual adventure. So, is there other questions people have about maps in general? And Dead Phoenix wrote, I thought in Dwarf Fortress you just made emotionally scarred dwarves. Yeah, you can. That's part of the game, but actually, I wouldn't play it. Okay, Dwarf Fortress is the hardest one. The best one is RimWorld. That one's easily the best one of that type. There's a lot though. There's Prison Architect. That one's similar. It's a little different, but it's actually a pretty good game. Where you're making prisons, but actually has the same exact elements. There's No Maria, which is a 3D version of kind of Dwarf Fortress. I like that one too quite a bit. So now in terms of actual, let's go back. Whoop, now we're back to us. So in terms of actual maps for your home games, if you're not doing this professionally, I would just say make it interesting. Like, make it have not just the rooms that you want things to happen in. It should look lived in. In fact, this did happen for another adventure where we were building a base, and the base literally just had the rooms with the encounters, and that was it. And I asked the author to go back and put in where are the bedrooms, where are the living quarters, like where, like this is supposed to be a base where
it had, if it's the one I'm thinking of, it had bedrooms and living quarters, but it didn't have like a big gathering space where everybody would just go and give evil speeches or things like that. There were some other things that
there was things that were missing. There were things that
it
were
had
missing.
A chapel, but the chapel was not necessarily enough for all of the bad guys to use. Right. So it was missing. It had all the rooms that you definitely needed, and it even had a bathroom, but it did not have a some of the things.
It didn't have enough. It didn't have
as
enough.
A whole.
Yeah, it just didn't have enough. And that's very, very common, is that where you will often put in the rooms you need. Now, of course, and keep in mind is that it's hard to come up with these extra rooms. It's hard to come up with rooms that are just like filler. But you know what? That's it creates tension. And I'll give you another example is that they were in Agents of Edgewatch, they found this like cellar, and the cellar was really big, and just by luck they missed, let's just say there's 15 rooms in the cellar and like 5 of them had encounters. They missed all the encounter rooms, so they went from one room to another to another to another. They kept going, and by the time they were halfway through, they were a complete emotional and nervous wreck. All of them. They all thought that this was terrible because they were like, where are the bad guys? Like, it actually was breaking them, and I loved it. And that is something you can do by using negative space and by putting nothing in it, because they are waiting for something to happen. And then when something finally did happen, it was unbearable because they kept opening doors and nothing kept happening. And I think about that a lot when I'm designing maps. Like, you got to put in the mundane because it builds tension. It also makes them really nervous, like for every door they open. And it's almost like a Jack in the Box, because it's like, okay, you open the first door, nothing happened. Okay, and then the second door, nothing. Third, fourth, and by the time they get to the fifth, they're getting really hesitant because they're like, these can't all be empty. They can't all have nothing behind them. So they're very carefully opening those doors the deeper they get in, and that's something else.
Yeah. So I was thinking about reasons why what are the pressures on the industry that have caused this to keep being a problem, even though I think people know about the not fitting the monsters in the room thing.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like people have known about that. Even not a lot of people have talked about the
Because
approach,
people don't
the
try.
negative price based on the approach.
Well,
I think that there are pressures that are out there. I discussed the one about the cartographers, and there's a few standard sizes and that. But I think another one is based on the fact that the industry standard, which is terrible, is not compensating the freelancers more for the fact that they include maps. And one thing that was good was that in Battlezoo, there were increased rates for freelancers for adventures over content that did not include maps, which helped compensate for the inclusion of maps. But not compensating for maps has a kind of a perverse negative pressure on the freelancer, because if you create a map that has let's say 7 additional B3s, right? Like the bedroom B3, which is the same words for the description as all of them, then you get paid nothing for that compared to a map that is half as complicated and doesn't have 7 B3s in a standard pay per word. So that could be part of it, is like you get places like Paizo or Wizards that you wouldn't be, because it's not even so much as someone saying, well, haha, since you won't pay me for it, I won't do it. Like, it's not like obstinacy. It's more of like in the back of your head, the pressure towards words versus.
I don't think it's as deliberate as you might say.
I'm saying I don't think it is deliberate.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying I think it's not like a haha, I won't do it. It's more of a subconscious pressure that may be affecting people without them knowing it. Is that it's having them do the thing that is not in their best interest. So even if they don't realize it, it may make it happen less often.
So Juno asks, what's something you would never put on a map? That's a good question.
I would say the monster's location, and by that I don't mean like a place for a starting point where you have a suggested starting point that is like, here in the GM thing we suggest that they start on these spots, but I mean like putting the monster baked in so you can't remove it from the VTT.
Yeah, well, that's something else. So that's something else. That's a push and pull.
It needs to be in another layer if you wanted to do that. Yeah,
so a lot of people, I'd say the majority of maps and adventures that are put out by non-WotC and Paizo people are pretty simple, and there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of good software out there. You can make your own maps, and they look pretty good. And also, it doesn't, it costs a lot less to make your own maps and just put them out there than to pay someone. Trust me. You can save a ton of money doing it that way. So most times I see maps are okay, or they'll do them in black and white, which is very common, or like a single color. And that's fine, because people might think, okay, maps are, maps just need to tell a story. You just need to see where it is and not have to worry about it. If you go to the craziness that I went to, if you look at this map, and trust me, oh boy, do these maps go. Oh my God, these maps don't even go to 11. These maps like go to 50. I mean, these maps are just too much. Even I was like, because I went to Blando, and Blando is known for doing like out of control like maps, and I just said go crazy. And when you have someone who's known to already go kind of crazy on when he's under control, and then I let off the shackles. I was like, go crazy, make crazy maps. And boy, did he let his freak flag fly, because he just put in everything. But if you
some of those maps are gorgeous.
Oh, they're insane.
You were just
they're ridiculous.
Just so good looking.
Oh, they're so good looking. But now these items are in the map. Like if I'm showing an example, like you see all that rug is in the map. That fireplace is on the map. Like that is going to be something that the PCs say, hey, I look at that rug. What's under the rug? So you got to be careful. You got to be very careful if you're putting too much stuff on your maps. I'm okay with it. And I made sure of that it was either written in the module or that it just says like, hopefully the GMs will know what's under the rug. Nothing. Or like what's in these drawers. clothes. You know, it's like you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to have like this just happened yesterday. They were going through bedrooms and they're like, what's in this room? Like old clothes that are stained. Like, what else? It's like, ooh, you find something. And then the thief was really excited. I'm like, yes, you find under the bed a dead raccoon. And they're like, ooh, can I identify it? I'm like, you don't have to go, you don't have to detail every single thing. But if you're going to do maps at this level, be aware that the PCs are going to expect this is there and expect that this is now part of the map. You can't go back. You can't just say, oh, that's not supposed to be there. So you have to be very careful of that. Yes, the example map here is more detailed than most modules. Yeah, I would say the maps in this adventure are probably more detailed than every map ever made ever in Adventure Paths. I can't. It's pretty. It's a hyperbole, but not by much. not by much. It is. He kind of went nuts because each of the maps also take place in different parts of the world, and so like if one map's underground, he changes the font, he changes the look, the feel. It's like it feels like it's underground. If one map's on the water, everything is wavy, and he's got ships and sea breeze and everything. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Oh, and then back to what Mark said about layers. I do ask for everything to be in layers so that one thing I do in the VTTs is that instead of having two maps, one with, say, a town, and then one with the town with all the roofs off, I just have him draw the map once, and then I just have the roofs as a separate layer. So that you turn off the layer, and then you can see the inside of the map. And that's really more for the VTTs. For the print, I can then, first of all, it's a way to pay for one map and get two maps out of it. For the print, you just have to show it twice. You just show it once with the roofs on and one with the roof off, or at least just with the section with the roof off. And that happens a fair amount. So, and actually, yeah, Polar Bear Bar says, I'd rather have maps with too much stuff versus players struggling to find anything to interact with. Yeah, that's something else, is that when you see maps, so I've seen it go both ways. I've played, I mean, heck, Mark does Theater of the Mind, so the map is in your head. I've also done where it's literally just stick figures. Those are the most common maps you see. But if you're gonna buy maps, and Paizo does this too, like they're pre-printed battle maps, especially for Starfinder. I find the Starfinder maps are even better than the Pathfinder maps. They have so much detail on them. They are very, very, very good. It is a lot of colorful details, a lot of interactable items. And my characters are always like, if you're in a fight and there's like in a bar and there's tables and chairs, they're going to say, I flip over that table and hide behind it because it's on the map. So you got to be careful. If you're going to put that on the map, then that's what's going to happen. Something else you got to be aware of, believe it or not, where do the doors go? Like, do the doors swing in? Do the doors swing out? Like I actually sometimes will put that in my adventures too, because it actually matters more times than not. You'd be surprised where, if a door swings out or where the door goes, especially for these small rooms, does matter, because maybe you don't have enough room for you to open the door. Like if you look at this example here, L4 and L3, I have the doors swinging into the rooms. If they swung out of the rooms into the hallway, they'd smack into each other, which you can't do. So even little things like that, you got to be careful of. I don't actually say which side the hinges are, but I have seen that. I've seen people actually put the doorknobs on the maps and actually show you where the doorknobs are so they can actually accurately depict. If I did it for this, I put it on the left side so that it swings into the wall. That way it gets out of the way in case you want to fight with the door open, things like that. So let's see. Jenna B, with all the details and emphasis for VTTs, will I have difficult running this on traditional tabletop with dry erase flip maps? No, not at all, because there is
it's absolutely going to be good in both.
Yeah.
I think what Stephen was saying is that it's the digital asset of the map and the VTT are emphasized in a way that makes the map more usable for you, as opposed to like more convenient for a print book
Mhm.
and the size that it might appear in a print book. And since you're going to have the digital version, that's going to be great in dry erase flip mats. However you want to use it, theater of the mind.
Yeah.
It's more usable no matter what. It's just I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, your dichotomy was virtual VTT. The map as its own separate thing is emphasized over the map as it appears on the page of a printed book, as opposed to VTT versus physical.
Yeah, you don't have to go this crazy. It's, if you look at the map on the left, in the middle, actually, that's what was provided to the cartographer. Like, that is the map that he then created, that Blando created this full color map from. So you can see, like, we do take a very simple map. And if you wanted to draw this out on the VTT, it's like, okay, you see where the walls are, you see where the doors are. If you want to put some beds in, you put some windows, done. It won't take long at all. And even if you wanted to put in some of these details, like, okay, fireplace, put in a rug, put in a bathtub, put in a cabinet, you can. It won't take long at all. Like, these are designed to be pretty easy. One thing I did do a lot of, except for some maps, another trick is use standard sizes. Try not to do like that map all the way on the left where you're using 7.5 for a grid. Use the freaking grid.
That also applies to things that go like weird angles and curves and other things like that. Like, there's a map in a Pathfinder Society first edition adventure. I think it maybe the Overflow Archives or something that was like notorious for the fact that it was entirely diagonal to the grid. Yeah. So it was like a diamond instead of a square, essentially. And so just everything got more annoying to work with.
Yeah, and that's something else, is that if you're going to be doing a map with caves, be aware that you got to be very careful with caves, because people are going to be like, okay, I can see around that corner if I move my character this way. Like, if you have an irregular wall and you're doing line of sight, the people are sitting there drawing. I don't know how many times I've had to, like, drawing the line, say, oh, I could just make it to get to that character. And you literally, like, oops, because I didn't draw the wall big enough. I meant it to be like one, tick bigger. Up now you don't have line of sight, So whenever you do irregular walls, just be very careful with irregular walls. Whenever I do irregular walls, I try to do irregular walls basically on the grid. Like, I try to have that, like, if I'm having a wall, I don't have it go like all over the place. I have it kind of like wavy, but it's wavy on the grid and then continues to go on the grid. So it's still on the grid, but it's not like cutting through the grid in multiple ways. Diagonals are tricky if you're going to be doing diagonals in your maps, because what always ends up happening is that you have a map and there's a diagonal and you have a square that has like 50% of the square, and then everyone always asks, it happens every game, can I fit in this square? It's like they want to get flanking, and it's like a half a square, and they're like, can I fit in there? And then if you say no, they're like, oh, come on, it's like, I'm playing a sprite, I can fit in there. And then you probably say yes, or you're like, oh, come on, I'm playing a half orc, it's 7 feet tall, I can fit in there. So that always freaking happens where you, like, if you have those half squares, that is where someone is going to want to go. It constantly happens. So, don't put a 5-foot door at the end of a 10-foot hallway. Yeah, that's very common. Actually, someone else said way back when that they prefer when there's 10-foot doors or 2 5-foot doors. That way you can go in 2x2 in the fight. I also actually agree with that. This one is specifically designed to have 5 feet hallway, because it doesn't make sense to have 10-foot doors in a bedroom
in a regular house.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
so plus also sometimes you want a choke point like that for tactical reasons.
Yeah, and also in this,
but only do it if you want a choke point to be potentially, depending on initiative order, like the key defining feature of the fight.
Yeah, and actually one of the interesting things in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, my favorite ability in Pathfinder, by the way, Mark, is the shove or push. I forgot what it's called. What's that?
Yeah, shove.
Shove. Shove is actually really easy for monsters to do. It's actually surprisingly simple, and it is ridiculously effective, because I've seen where you have these like, aha, I have a choke point. I'm like, shove, and I get you out of the way, and then suddenly the monsters spill out. They're like, wait a second, you couldn't do that in Pathfinder First Edition. I'm like, yeah, well, this is in Pathfinder
You
First
could.
Edition.
There was a bull rush, but it took like your
It was
whole turn.
possible, right? It was too
It was
much.
a standard action, and
Yeah.
it provoked attacks of opportunity.
Yep. And that's the thing, is that in this, it's like, first action, shove, second
And if
action.
they hit you with the attack of opportunity, you got a penalty to the roll,
Yeah.
to the D20 roll, equal to the amount of damage you took.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was-
Well, this one is
It's
easy.
brutal to shove in
Yeah.
Pathfinder First
Yeah,
Edition.
it's really easy to actually get past choke points. I find in Pathfinder Second Edition, it's actually frighteningly easy to get past choke points in Pathfinder, which is good actually. And Sayori Okan of Seven wrote said nobody does diagonals the way I think they should. So yeah, diagonals are always tricky because everyone has their own opinion on some diagonals. My basic rule with diagonals is that you can't, it's a hard corner and you can't go around a diagonal. You can't go through a diagonal. So if you're in a diagonal, you have to go up and then across. You can't go through. That's about my only main rule. Whoa. Hold on a second. I got a dog fight over here. I gotta break them up. All right, they're okay. Just got very excited. Dogs, what are you doing? What are you doing? Do you have some opinions on maps?
Yeah, I think they do.
They do.
Didn't think there was enough space outside of the building for them to run around.
I know. Well, they got real excited.
Go
They
on
must
a
have saw
walk.
something. All right, guys, behave.
They want to come on and give their
Behave.
point of view
I know.
about the maps. If we
Behave,
get 50
doggies.
likes, we'll let Steven's dogs give their opinion about
We
the
got
maps.
45 likes. We're almost there. We just got 5 more likes.
Yeah, so we just 5 more likes, and we will hear Steven's dog's opinions about why people are doing maps wrong.
So, I think we covered a lot of the basics. I don't know if you
I think
have
we did.
some ideas.
We covered everything that I was expecting to hear based on what you told me when
Mhm.
I had first started at Roll for Combat. So,
And the other thing I would say is for bigger maps, although I don't think bigger maps are as much, is that when one of the maps for one of the towns, actually Seaview, was made, is that the scale was really small, and it's supposed to have whatever 6,000 people, and then I was like, I literally just look up real towns and see the size, and I'm like, this is not right. This is the wrong size. So that was easy to fix. That was easy, just like, okay, change the scale, double it, suddenly things are bigger. But
I do that a lot.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times I had to fix the monsters don't fit in the room thing by making every square 10 feet. It made a lot, like very little sense for some of the points in the map to do when I did that, but it was necessary. And it's the only thing I can do that's easy.
Yeah.
And usually when I find out that it doesn't work is like right as I'm trying to use it. And so therefore I always do whatever's easy and just change it to 10 feet. So I really appreciate that for me as the GM that Indigo Isles is going to be on a 5-foot basis.
Oh yeah, this actually just happened.
Like that it's big enough that I don't have to do that.
Do not make your maps 10 feet, especially now in the world of VTTs, because I had a couple of maps, and they were designed for 10-foot squares. And let me tell you, it messed up everyone's measurements because everyone's trying to use the VTT measurements, and none of the tools work because all the squares are wrong. So yeah, like I think in the world of VTT, things are going to change. We're going to have more layers on maps. Everyone's going to go to 5-foot grids no matter what. They're going to have more space around the maps. You can have bigger maps. Like that's the nice thing is that, yeah. And then Aaron Mortar writes that realistic scale maps aren't always good for fighting it. Yeah, that's something else is that because people take up so much space in Dungeons Dragons and Pathfinder, you need more space. Like as people said, this master bedroom is gargantuan. Like if you do the square footage on this thing, it is huge. The one to the left, the original one, that's probably much more realistic, and even that one's pretty big. But you know what? It's a game. Okay, we need a lot of space for that. So we got 49 likes. Oh well, I guess we're not going to do anything silly. Here we go.
That's fine.
Is there a good rule of thumb for how big a room should be for a standard fight? 3 squares per for character. Okay, so as I said, the very first thing you need to do is, when I would get adventures back, is I would look at the maps, I would look at the encounters, and then I would see if the monsters fit in the room.
Yeah, make sure all your monsters and all the PCs.
First, make sure the monsters fit, because if the monsters don't fit,
if they don't even fit in there at all, it's like, how are they even in there?
Correct. Then I always say 5, and really I say 6. Oop, 50 likes. 6 PCs. I say 6 because you never know. You might have more. Adventure. Yeah, published adventures. If you're doing your own
adventure, you probably want more space than that, because even if there's only 4 or 5 PCs, they might have animal companions and construct companions and Eidolons and
That's
stuff.
That's why I say 6. So, and then you just want, I'd say, about 50% more room, at least for maneuverability. And again, it's like you just need space. Like, you just need some room, because the fighters need room. You need a place for the spellcasters, and also depending on what type of enemies are in the room. Like if it's a fight with a lot of the bad guys are melee, well, then you probably want room for people to start moving around a little, and you don't want people to get too stagnant. If it's a fight that has a lot of ranged and fighting, and like if there's a lot of ranged combat, or if there's a lot of magic users, you probably want the room pretty big, because you want to have a lot of space for them to move around, because they don't want to get pinned down, because the fight will end very quickly if the magic users are pinned down in the corner and killed. So you want lots of space for them to move and get away from the PCs.
So we got over 50 likes. Are we going to have your dog's take on what makes a good map?
I don't know. I don't think Zoe wants to. Zoe does not like getting picked up. So I don't know if she wants to give her take. I can try to get her, though.
Okay. Well,
hey,
let's
Ruby.
See.
Ruby likes being picked up, though. She loves
Ruby can give her take on...
Ruby, where are you? Ruby. I don't know where she went.
Oh, okay. I guess she's not here anymore. It took too long to get the 50 likes. We'll do a different one.
You answer some questions. There
are some good questions in here. So Con of 7 has a very interesting question that I think we've all been asking, which is, why am I so irrationally angry whenever Steven makes a great point? So I think that that's a good question to ask. You need to kind of do some introspection for part of it, but also just think it's just kind of, the way that Steven presents his points. It makes it so that they land a little bit more solidly and you'll remember them, but you might be irrationally angry. Just like the way that, and he'll have that little smile, like it's on his emoji. If you've seen the little cartoon emojis they have for me and Steven. Oh look, is that Ruby?
It's Ruby.
All right, Ruby. So Ruby, what are your problems with maps in general?
Is there not enough food on the maps? Is that your problem? Is it the Ruby Phoenix tournament? Is that it? That you don't like the name? You're like, why is the Ruby food, Phoenix?
I see it. Yeah, Ruby's like, "Ruh, Steven. We gotta get a Ruby snack."
Here we go. The maps. Whoa. She wants to go. She's like, I hate those maps. I hate maps that don't have enough room for me to run and to chase squirrels and to. Oh yes. She's such a good dog. Oh, now Zoe's here too. Yeah, Zoe.
Oh, now Zoe is interested.
Well, she doesn't
now that Zoe says Ruby's getting attention.
I know.
So Ruby, would you use the maps from Published Adventures for one Ruby snack?
Yes, she would.
But two Ruby snacks?
Ooh. She's a Whedon, by the way, so I have Whedons. Hello, Ruby. Say hi, everyone. Hi. All right, you're a good dog. Oh, okay, I'll let her go. Whoa! Oh, and there went my Wii halfway across the room. My Switch.
Okay.
My Switch is gone.
So I will see what other questions they have during that. Let's see. So there's also, why are hex maps not used more? So hex maps definitely have a lot of interesting value in terms of just tactical combat using hexes instead of squares. You can avoid with some of the issues with diagonals, where you either have annoying 1-2-1-2 counting, or You have weird, like almost video game style moving diagonally to move at a faster speed, like in which one of the Tales games was it where the monsters chased you on the map and they were not fast enough to outpace you if you moved diagonally, but they would outpace you if you went straight. It was one of them.
I don't know. Yeah, the problem with hex
there's
maps,
some RPGs that have that on squares, so that's the good thing about hex maps. But the problem is that as a cartographer, like nobody like does floor plans that are like based on hexes unless they're like a evil bee monster architect.
Problem with hexes also is that they actually, this is gonna be the weirdest thing, but trust me on this, it gives you too many decision points. It actually gives you too many options when it comes to combat, because when you have 6 sides to worry about, there's a lot, it's like, it's just too much. It actually is too many locations, there's too many ways to get away. You can't box people in. You can't take advantage. Like, if you wanted to...
Aren't there more directions that you can go in with squares somewhat, unless there are walls? Like,
well, in theory, you can space... go... In theory, you can go more, but it's also how you handle diagonals.
Oh, yeah, that is true.
See, because some people don't let people... Like, if some people don't let people go through diagonals, if you have a square, and you're right, there is 8 versus 6.
If there's a wall, you get blocked.
Right,
the wall will block both. But if there's a creature, you need 8 to surround someone in an open space instead of 6.
But some people don't let them go through. I've seen
even
GMs.
From creatures. If creatures are at your north, south, east, and west, they won't let you move diagonally, like northwest, to get out from those 4 creatures.
Or they might argue it's difficult or whatever. I've seen.
Wow, I've actually never have I ever seen someone do that.
I have,
but that is how it works for hard corners on if it's a wall.
Right. No, you're right. Yeah. It's that squares do have 8 points of connection, but strangely, a lot of people don't seem to. I would love to run an experiment to see how many people use diagonals effectively. And I think not a lot. I think people just don't use them. Also has to do with the math, because it's like, well, it's 1 square, then 2 squares, then 1 square, and I got to keep track of that. I'll just move straight. It's just so much easier. But with VTTs...
Tales of Zestiria is the one where you can run diagonally to escape almost all random encounters. So if you've never played that,
I did not play that one, but I did.
Then you can try it.
I have Tales of Zestiria. I have that one. I have it.
Tales of Zestiria with the Z. You can escape from almost all of the map random encounters that are supposed to be faster than you, and eventually catch up if you don't zone out of them by tilting yourself slightly from the way that you want to go and running diagonally, which will let you go square root of 2 times faster. And every time Linda or I were doing that when we were playing in 2-player, we referred to every tabletop RPG that has diagonals always costing 1. And being like, look, we're moving like in tabletop RPGs where diagonals are 1 and we're outpacing the monster.
So RoboCop Forever, which by the way is a fantastic name. And I saw RoboCop in the theater when I was a kid. That was fun. It is right. You are right. Squares have 8 points of connection as opposed to a hexagonal, which has 6. But the 6 are all of equal weight. And I will argue that the squares, that the sides have a much higher weight in people's minds than the diagonals. And a lot of people, I don't know if they forget them or they don't use them as much, but I have seen it while you have these hexagonals, and I've done things like Starship Combat and other things within like Starfinder, is that they just get crazy, man. It's like,
well, you know what? I'll make a needless grid-based math joke now. Okay. The reason why all the people who live near you are always thinking of those diagonals as being 2 spaces away and not just adjacent spaces is because they are using the Manhattan distance.
I'm trying to figure out, what does that mean?
What
does that mean?
Oh, because in math, the Manhattan distance is traveling along a grid only uses orthogonal and the diagonals count as 2.
Oh, well, yeah. Well,
And
okay.
and you live near Manhattan.
I live
so
in
it's
Manhattan.
funny.
There is no diagonals. I was like,
Yes.
there literally is no
See?
diagonals in Manhattan.
So they're using the Manhattan distance, and you're in Manhattan.
Yeah, right.
So that's why it was a bad math joke.
Oh, okay. That was so bad I didn't even get it. Wow, now we got a lot of questions. People asking a whole bunch of things.
So people are talking about the 1-2-1-2 diagonals versus 1-1-1 or 2-2-2. Here's the best one. Everybody ready?
No.
Meters.
Ugh.
Or yards.
Don't do
or
that.
Yards.
Don't do that. I know in Europe they hate that, but it's just...
But if you use meters or yards and you have the squares be, instead of 5 feet, 3 meters or 3 yards, and yes, that is, by the way, bigger by a lot. But if you have a 3 meters situation, then or sorry, not 3, 2 meters or 2 yards. That's a little bigger than 5 feet. It's like 6 feet for the yards. Then the diagonal is 3. Actually, and then you don't have to do a 1.5 and a 1-2-1-2. You could just say this is 2, and then I move diagonal, so that's 3 more, and you could just not have to add fractions.
Ollie Wright also writes that Gloomhaven used hex maps. Yeah, Gloomhaven was great with hex maps, and I actually got to see them used correctly for maybe the first time ever. But also, if you had to draw out a hex map quickly versus like take a pre-published adventure, take a hex map, and I know because I ran Kingmaker, and let me tell you, making those hex maps was a pain, man. It was such a pain. Because if you counted wrong, which always freaking, I don't know why, it always counted wrong with the axes. You're drawing and you're like, wait, what does this line up? Oh, I miscounted. And then, it's very easy to count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know, for whatever reason, it was just easier to count out squares than hexes. And I remember my Kingmaker maps were always just a pain in the butt to do when I ran that by hand. But oh god, I'm done with hexes. Hexes are funny. They're probably the better and the superior thing.
I mean, for combat, but for like drawing your actual map and putting like a house on it and a lot of other things, they have issues.
Yes. Yeah. It's one of those things. I actually saw a funny video. I don't know why this comes to my mind, but is that has nothing to do with anything, but loading airplanes is purposely inefficient. And then the old days, back in the 70s and 80s, you know how they used to have people load the airplanes? They used to say, planes here, everyone get on, and then people would just go on randomly, and it was incredibly efficient. Having people randomly go on an airplane was super efficient as opposed to the way they do it now, and they do it for a tiered system. And that's an example of like, although hexes are probably superior than squares, they're a pain, and there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do it. So even though it's superior, people are using squares because they're easier to do. So that's what
the best thing for the airplane would be if people got up and stood in line in reverse order, where the further back they were,
correct, but
farther in front they are.
Then they can't upsell you.
Correct.
Because the whole thing about airlines is they have a tiered system, and they want you to pay money for the tiers to get higher up the ladder in the pyramid structure. So if you did that, then yes. So it was fascinating. I was like watching like old methodologies versus new, and how the new ones are purposely inefficient. That's like the old typewriter, you know, with the QWERTY keyboard. That the original keyboard was the competitor was much more efficient, but it was so efficient and people would type so fast.
Is that the Dvorak?
Yeah, the Dvorak keyboard would jam the keys. So if you did Dvorak, it would hit and the keys would smack into each other because people were typing too fast. So people purposely made the QWERTY keyboard so it's slower to type and takes longer, so the keys want to jam into each other. And now we all live with an inefficient keyboard for the rest of our lives, unless you want to teach yourself Dvorak and go much faster. So there you go. So we are back up to, we're using square maps because, yeah, they're more inefficient, but that's just the way we that is how our world works. Will Mark be doing TikTok dances for the new Roll for Combat TikTok account? So I literally made the TikTok account over the weekend with my
We
son.
can have Ruby do TikTok dances.
Sure. I did it just for fun, and I put the Elder Rap, and it got a lot of likes, and like I was like, whoa, power of TikTok, man. Holy moly. Let's see what it's up to. I'm actually curious.
Let's see.
Can
I even find it if I search TikTok for Roll for Combat and Elder Rap?
Let me turn this down. It's a little loud. Yeah. Holy moly! Even since I did this yesterday, I just put it up, and let's see.
I don't actually see it in. Maybe it's because it's a new account.
Yeah. No. Wow. I mean, for account that's been up for a day or two, it already has it with no publicity whatsoever. 16 followers, 55 likes, several hundred views.
Oh, there it is.
Of the Elder Rap.
Yeah, 585 views. That's that's a lot of views.
Yeah, it's more than I expected. So yeah, we're fooling around with YouTube stories, fooling around with TikTok. I'm just curious. It's getting very popular very quickly, and we're just seeing what are different ways to hit people up. So cannot create a hex map in Minecraft. There we go. That's another one. Oh yeah, if you're a Minecraft user, Minecraft actually is interesting because if you're really big into Minecraft, not only do you know how to make maps, but you're good at 3D maps too. That's a whole other story though. I don't even want to get into that because I feel unless it's a video game or using a really good VTT a 3D map is more work than it's worth most times, because it requires a lot of stopping to like figure out where things are, and you're starting to actually do math. And unfortunately, we are up to the point in our Pathfinder games where everyone is flying. So we are having to do 3D map quite a bit. I basically just ask how high up they are, and that's it. Like I don't go crazy. I'm just like, how high up are you? We're like 60 feet. I'm like, okay, you're at a range, of these things. I don't try to like figure out the exact distance and everything because it can get too much. But
you don't use the Pythagorean theorem?
I estimate it. It's easy to estimate the Pythagorean theorem in your head, so we do estimate it.
Well, the good news is if they're up by so much that it's a lot more than the lateral distance, then it's only a little bit more than the height.
Yeah. I mean, and it's I just also tell people
not that high off the ground, then it's only a little bit more than the lateral distance. So that does make it easier.
Well, I tell people don't go off the ground too much because we had a fight and someone jumped onto one of those bird things. They flew up like 200 feet up in the air, and then they got bucked off, and the PC fell and had
That's
2 hit points.
Damage.
2 hit points left. That was 100 points damage.
I'm impressed that they had 2 hit points left.
They had like 188. Yeah, they got 188 hit points. They were like, what's the worst that can happen? I'm like, trust me, you can take a lot of damage. That's what happens.
Don't ask Steven that question. He is ready to tell you what the worst that can happen is.
Well, if you listen to the actual plays, my go-to is, I got good news and I got bad news. What do you want to hear? And they always say, there's never any good news. I'm like, well, I didn't say it was good news for you. I said it was good news for the monsters.
The good news for the bird is that you got bucked off. The bad news for you is that you took 100 damage.
Yes, 100 points of damage, and you're prone. And you dropped everything.
To add insult to injury, you're prone.
That's the best part. It's like, and you're prone. They're like, come on, man. It's like I got to spend another round picking up my stuff and getting up on top of that.
So there's a question from Polar Bear Bar wondering when if the first volume of Jewel of the Indigo Isles is released, will we also release the ancestries from the character guide, so that if they want to start running the first adventure with those ancestries, that they'll have it available to run my own character in it?
Yes and no. Yes and no is because it's ready, kind of. There's 3 books. There's like the player's guide, there's the free player's guide, and then there's the adventure.
Yeah, there's the character guide.
Yeah, character guide.
Which is kind of like Lost Omens character guide for Pathfinder, and then it has new ancestries and all sorts of stuff. There's the free player's guide. That's like a player's guide for a Pathfinder AP. It's free. It's a PDF. We actually put a lot more in it than you would usually get because we're committed to giving you a lot. Like an entire giant gazetteer for the starting town. And then there's the adventure, which is ginormous. Yeah. Those are the 3 files. And the free player's guide, I feel like is pretty close overall, but the character guide has a lot of things in it, and that is where the ancestries are. And the ancestry part of the character guide, I think, is close, but I'm not sure if all the art is in.
No, not everything else. I mean, what I'm probably going to end up doing is just start releasing these things in stages. Is that I can definitely release, like, it's simple as this. I can either release everything at once, but that's going to take a while, or I can release it in stages so people can start playing, just the way that Pathfinder does it. I can definitely release pretty quickly. The ancestries are more or less ready. I think I just have like...
Oh, do you have all the art almost?
Pretty much. Okay. The balance is... The art's actually just about done. The art should be done this week.
So that's for the deity guide. If you want to use the deities from Alan,
but I didn't do any layout.
But you don't
yet.
have to.
No, that's going to come. I think that's going to come second. So I think what the goal is, I want to get out the free guide. I want to get out enough of the ancestries that you can at least use those, and maybe we'll put in like the backgrounds. And the free guide has enough about the gods that if you want to use the balanced gods of Elokar, that you can do it off the free guide. And then at least the first adventure, that will keep you busy. Like, I know people are chomping on the bit. You can then start. Like, you can start the adventure. Unless you are absolutely insane, you are not finishing this adventure that quickly. And now this is for Pathfinder, and then we're going to do the 5e1 shortly after. The 5e1 is also kind of ready to go, but the Pathfinder one is... in the past, what we've done is that we did the Pathfinder one, we finish it, and then work on the 5e1. The 5e1's been worked on at the same time, but I do want to finish the Pathfinder one, because the way I do the layout is I do Pathfinder first, and then I modify the layout for 5e, because 5e, strangely, is usually smaller in most cases, so it's a little easier for me to make... It's easier to go down than to go up, if that makes sense. It's easier to remove pages than add them. So there you go. Because I know we're talking about Dungeons and Dragons, but the adventure's coming out for both. But we kind of want to just get the Pathfinder one done first, just mentally easier. And the first part is going to take a while to get through. You mean for the players? Yeah. Oh yeah. The first part is I'm sure that by the time you actually 100 pages of I'm sure that by the time you actually make it through the first part, that everything will be done. Everything will be ready, unless you're like one. Yeah. There are some groups that play like 4 times a week. Unless you kill yourself. There's no way. There's no way you're getting through the first part in less than a few months. The question was a really interesting one about the ancestries, because it does make sense that you would want to have those so that you can play Gamayan. Well, yeah, a lot of people have been asking that. I've been seeing other people have been asking me. I mean, not even that you would need to have it before the adventure, but I mean, for the adventure, like by the time if we release part 1 of the adventure and someone wanted to be a Gamayan, they can't actually start it until they get it. Right. But we're going to release them all. I don't know if I'm going to release them literally simultaneously or very close to one another. So we'll see how it goes. Right now we're in the process of finalizing the we're finalizing the adventure so it can be released publicly. That's the easiest way to say that. Hey, what's the giant monster in the top right of the background screen? So there's a couple of new monsters on here, by the way. That is... What is that one? I gotta look it up. Hold on. That one is... That is the Mirage Crawler. And that that's like... It's hard to see, but it's something like 15, 20 feet across. It looks like a boulder. There's a horse. You can see the little horse. You can see the horse. You can see it's like a boulder, and then the boulder comes alive and eats you. It's just like, hello, friends. I will devour you. Now, the one in the bottom right hand, that's another new one. That's the Gunpowder Bear. That is a bear, and all these are in the Battlezoo Bestiary Strange and Unusual, which you'll be able to get at battlezoo.com, or you just go to battlezoo.com and get their current books, including the Jewel Indigo Isle that we're talking about now. That Gunpowder Bear is a little teddy bear that blows up. That's kind of it. There's
That's
a little bit
right.
more to him, but that's kind of it.
That's basically what it is. And also the rabbit art just came in.
Yep.
It's a telekinetic rabbit.
Telekinetic rabbit. It actually, the original art, I did an action scene instead. The original art was the rabbit just floating, just like hello. It's just a little bunny rabbit floating. They fly and they have a bubble around them, and they use telekinetic powers to attack you. I think it's like a CR8. That's like, it's actually a pretty strong monster. It's like, oh, it's a bunny. It's a little bunny. Oh my god, that bunny is dynamite. So that is the action pose.
And the dynamite bear says, "Hey, I'm dynamite. Don't give it to the bunny."
Yes, that's from, you know what that's from.
Yes.
But yeah, no,
yes.
The bunny
has a vicious streak of mile wine.
Yes, it does have a vicious streak of mile. It's a killer. So yeah, I went with the cute stuff this week on the bottom. We have cute stuff, and but yeah, those are new. So continuously, we'll be putting up new pieces of art. I have a couple of other new ones because now we're moving. Well, we're always moving forward. The one I have not been spoiling yet is that we do have the arts for the ancestries, but I'm not going to show that yet because
even I haven't seen.
Well, those are spoilers. Those are spoilers.
Yeah.
So.
Even I haven't seen the art for the Indigo Isles ancestries except for the first few that we did put on the show when we first talked about them.
Yeah, the gunpowder bear, it's a little hard to see because it's small, but there's a little, if you look, you see that little cord above its right shoulder? If it pulls the cord, it explodes. So it basically, and its backpack and its satchels are filled with gunpowder. And what they do is they bite you. So their whole shtick is they jump on you, they bite you, they grab you, and they explode. So they're like living time bombs, or they're like suicide. They're kind of nasty. So oh yeah, the bunny has a weakness of magicians called Tim. Damn it, that is so good, Mark. We got to add that to the. We have to add that to the entry for the bunny. A weakness.
Why?
Because if Tim
didn't actually help them against the bunny, he just laughed at them.
That's true, but it's still pretty funny though. I like when you have weaknesses that are just super silly like that.
Now, if I think what we could do is give it, if we wanted to literally be the killer rabbit, which it by the way is not, and has no similarity to, but we could. If I was going to do the killer rabbit, I would give it a weakness to explosion damage because the holy hand grenade.
There we go.
Although the holy hand grenade wasn't enough to actually defeat it, but or wait, actually did the holy hand grenade?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, it did.
It did. It blew up. Yeah, you have to roll.
So there you go. So since you used the holy hand grenade of Antioch,
yes.
Then you would want to give it a weakness to explosions, so the gunpowder bear could defeat it.
That's. Oh my god, that would work. That would work. You take the gunpowder bear, you pull the trigger, you throw it at it, it latches onto the bunny. Boom! No more bunny. There you go. Dreaded gazebo. Oh. That gazebo. There's no gazebos yet. I do know all the memes because I do. One, I've been around, and two, I do read Knights of the Dinner Table. It's my favorite comic, and I've read all of them, and there's everything in there about the head of Vecna, the dreaded gazebo, all that stuff. And that's where that's from. The dreaded gazebo is from like one of the first issues. But it was so long ago, it was actually in Dragon Magazine when Dragon Magazine was still in print. That's how long Knights of the Dinner Table's been around. Which is like
4 shalt thou not count, neither 2, 4. Excepting that thou then proceed to 3.
That's right. No one that can say 2.
5 is right out.
5 is right out. I love that one. It's so weird that movie has become so. It's funny now too. What's scary about that movie is I watch that movie and I think to myself, man, half the people in this movie are probably dead. And they were so ahead of their time that it's like, wow, these are geeks before we even knew what geeks were, before the word existed, and they were doing cool stuff like this. Oh yeah, we can have the bunny have a weakness to divine and holy damage. That's not a bad one actually. It's CR 7 or 8.
There you go. You could do that if it was supposed to be the killer rabbit.
Yeah, that is. Well, we haven't finalized the monsters, so that is something we could do on a stream. is that we bring up the monsters and have people help us build them.
I'm just surprised that the people in Monty Python and the Holy Grail were alive in the 1800s.
Well, you know, as I said, only some of them are still alive, not all of them.
Oh, but like, just that's pretty impressive, even if it was late 1800s when the word geek was invented.
Well, geek had a very different meaning. It was like a.
Sure. It started as it was like someone who's in a circus.
Yeah, that bit off the heads of chickens.
It
was it was not a good word, but we've co-opted it to mean whatever we are now. Or you're more like a nerd than a geek. I don't even know what we are. Now we're just people.
I think people just use words and it means whatever they want it to mean when they're talking about it. That's how labels work. And it causes issues when two people have very different opinions of what the label means and they are too attached to their own identity. Welcome to the to 2022, where we're in the people getting angry about labels that they define differently age.
Oh, I don't get it. It's again, it's I do find it fascinating. It's like I turn on TV and they're talking like on the Today Show, and they're talking about the new the new Lord of the Rings. They're talking about the new the HBO show. I'm just like, what a world. It's like this is mainstream culture that they're talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And when we were kids,
mainstream news will tell you about it.
Like when we were kids, like no one, not only were you ostracized, but you were beaten up for liking these things. And now it's on the Today Show, and they literally are. It's like, ooh, look at the fantasy, look at the hobbits and the elves and the magic and the dragons. And I'm just like, what a world, man. And it's like, I don't know. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? I can't tell anymore. But ironically, there's so much geek media. I have not seen it. My friends are all saying, oh, they all saw The Sandman. Everyone I know watched it. I didn't. I don't have time to watch it. And more importantly, I read the books. I don't need to watch it. I read them. Do I need to watch it? Did you watch The Sandman, Mark? Are you going to watch The Sandman?
I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about it from people. So I may watch it. I'll put that on my queue of things to watch alongside maybe the latest season of Stranger Things, since I've seen the other ones, but not this last one.
I have not seen the latest one, and yeah.
Oh, is there an even later one? Because the one
season
with
4.
Vecna that everyone's talking about, I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen that one either. And I loved Stranger Things so much, but it just
I haven't had time with this Kickstarter and other stuff.
I haven't had any time. I've actually watched nothing. The only thing I've watched is I do watch Why We Hide in Shadow. What was it?
What We Do in the Shadows.
What We Do in the Shadows. That show, God, I love that show.
I've seen the first season of that, but I didn't pick it back up after the second season. It gets much better.
It actually, the first season is good, but it actually gets stronger as it goes. It's really, really good.
Oh, maybe I should go back to it then.
Definitely.
I thought the first season was pretty good, but
it gets much better.
Then after the gap waiting for the second season, I was like,
It actually, they're up to the fourth season because they're hitting their groove and they know what to do. And they also get a lot of guest stars, and the guest stars are good. Like Mark Hamill is funny, and they have an overarching arch that's really interesting. It's actually very, very well done. I watched that. I watching
like overarching arches.
I know,
like flying buttresses, any kind of architecture going to support things.
There's a whole bunch of Gothic architecture in the show. Let me tell you, you'll love it. It's the main part of the. In fact, this latest episode was all about redoing their house. So there you go.
There you go.
So you can have it. In fact, yeah, you can learn a lot from map making. Look at the house in man.
Yeah.
I got 3 spam risks in a row. Someone really wants to sell me that auto insurance. That's
Don't do it. Don't do it, Steven. The auto insurance is a scam.
Really? I actually never. I don't even pick up my phone anymore. Even if it's people I know.
Unless I know who it is.
I don't even know anymore. The Sandman. Yeah, the originals. The books were so good. That was I would recommend you read it rather than watch it. I think I think the books are. I think it's short. I haven't
really read that much Neil Gaiman.
Oh, it's the Sandman. That was like a rebel. That was a big deal when that came out. That was like the talk of the town. Like that's all people talked about when it was out, because it was so interesting and no one was doing anything quite like it.
Really? But it was really, a lot of people talked about it when it came out. Wasn't that like during
80s,
the time
late
when
80s,
in the 80s when but you said that during that time geek culture was niche and nobody talked about it.
I was in Carnegie Mellon, so we all talked about it.
Oh, okay. So you were at Carnegie Mellon,
Yes.
so that at Carnegie Mellon everyone talked about it.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Well, up in this way, in the geek channels, we would talk about it, and when
the
I would go to the
weirdest thing
store,
for me is that like D&D and Pathfinder and tabletop RPGs was not something that people talked about at MIT almost at all.
no one played D&D. When I went to school, no one played D&D. No one played role-playing games. What we did do, we played a lot of computer games. That was very, very popular as computer games. Why like Tetris came out around there. Just a lot of like very famous games back then, and man, that's like people were just obsessed with those. Very much into comic books. That actually was the big scene, much more than gaming. And that's what a lot of people were talking about.
That's why Sandman was there.
Well, comics in the late 80s was kind of probably the peak. That was that's like when Spawn came out, Sandman, Image, like all the independents, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Actually, was out a little bit before that, but like Mage, like all the big independent books were coming out right about then. And I was really big in the comics then, like really big in the comics. And unfortunately, that's when D&D Second Edition came out, and I bought it. I was excited about it. I didn't know anyone wanted to play it. I actually even got the Warhammer role-playing game back then, because that just came out. But again, I couldn't find anyone who wanted to play it. You'd think at Carnegie Mellon you'd find people who wanted to play it.
You'd think you would find it at MIT pretty easily, but if in the case of MIT, though, it wasn't that nobody was doing any kind of games. It was that there was like a club for like LARPs, and
there was LARPing
because of the fact that was a major club that everybody at MIT pretty much had heard of. Like the kind of people who would want to play one or the other often went to that. There's also a board gaming club that played board games, but as I discovered, because I attempted multiple times to create a tabletop role-playing club, that the people who approve clubs first of all thought it was the same as LARPs. So then we got an affidavit from the people who did the LARPs that is like, this is different than us. It is not the same thing. Then they were like, well, the board gaming club's charter said that includes board games and all games.
Ugh.
And we were like, all games? Wouldn't that mean football can't? So you can't have one. It's like, we can't have a football
don't
team
get into
because
a rules argument.
That's a game. So then
Mark.
we got the people from the board gaming club to say also it's not a board game. And then they were like, well, we just don't want to.
Oh God. Yeah,
it was pretty funny.
Nah, we were big into. No, we didn't do any of that stuff. And board games like Euro games just weren't around. Like nothing was around back then. This was right before Magic the Gathering came out. It was right in kind of the doldrums. There's no geekdom. There was no Star Wars. That didn't come back at that point. It was like I was big into fantasy books and big into comic books. That sort of was the epitome of geek culture at that time. And video games, a lot of video games, especially MMOs, but text-based MMOs back then. Those were very popular because we were one of the few people on the internet. So anyhow, as you can say, as we're talking about video games,
I didn't
comics,
see any other questions in here.
I don't see any other questions, and as usual, it's already getting pretty late, and I got things to do.
So why don't we call it here then?
Okay, and once again, well, we had 60 likes, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments in the chat, and we'll answer them. Do like and subscribe. Hit that bell if you want to listen to us. Oh, someone asked about the newsletter. Man, Mark, did you even write the newsletter this week? I didn't even look.
I didn't do it this week because we have been doing it, and you told me what we should do leading up to the final week, but we didn't discuss what to do after the Kickstarter was over together, and then it just like we both didn't think about it.
I know.
So we don't know, because we want to always try to innovate instead of just always doing the same thing. We want to think about what to include, and what we were including up to the Kickstarter, which was like sneak peeks of like stories about fighting some of the different monsters from Strange and Unusual, and like Itheria's stuff that she's writing about the monsters from your monster. Well, I ran out of those. I mean, we wrote about
I
all
gotta
of
think.
those.
Let me think it through. It's like
we probably need to find what we're gonna do again, and we can't do create. I mean, I guess we technically could do creating a new monster for Strange and Unusual. It's not too late, but I don't really want to do that.
I don't want to do that either.
We have to figure out what new content we want to put in. So that means you should send us some messages in Discord or anywhere else that you like to communicate with us with ideas for newsletter features. I definitely enjoyed writing those little Alucard lore and the GM tips that I put into the newsletters as well. But I feel like the things we had in the newsletter leading up to the Kickstarter were pretty popular, but we've also kind of done those for a long time, and they were at their best leading up to the Kickstarter.
So. Like we're kind of done with that. We got to figure out the new thing. Bernardo Silva says, "Hey, Steven, since you like video games, do you got a Steam Deck?" Yes,
he has a Steam Deck.
I do have a Steam Deck. I have a Steam Deck right here, my friend, and I got the OLED. And if you want to know what I'm playing, I am currently playing. Return to Sun. Xenoblade Chronicles 3. I actually love this game. I'm like 50 hours in. I'm like halfway through.
Wow.
It's really good. It's really good.
50 hours into a Xeno game? Does that mean that you had like 8 to 10 hours of gameplay and
no, what 40
hours of 40 hours of movies?
No, it's like 30 hours. 30 hours of movies. No, it's actually a lot
20 hours of gameplay. They figured out how to put in more gameplay now.
It's really good. At night, after I usually play about 1 hour a night, like before I go to bed, and it's it came out a month ago, so you sneak in an hour here, you sneak in an hour there. There you go. What was the Strange and Unusual previews? Yeah, I guess we can start doing some more Strange and Unusual. I don't know. I got to think about it.
Like the little stories of people fighting the Strange and Unusual monsters are among the few things that we
can continue.
That and more Elderdex entries as we make Eldamon, we could keep doing, because there's a lot of Eldamon and there's a lot of Strange and Unusual. There's almost an equal number. They're very close. But the Itheria Nyx Year of Monsters entries, we kind of ran out of those. So I mean, but we could keep doing Strange and Unusual monsters as we get art for those, and Elderdex entries as we
Elderdex we have enough for forever. We have a lot of Elderdex.
Basically. It depends on whether or not Fearout and his wife produce like the art, which right now we have more art than we have Elderdex entries. So we should be fine on that regard. The question is, should we just make them slightly shorter and just do the Strange and Unusual entry and the Elderdex entry each time? That's a possibility. We just hadn't had that discussion and figured it out yet. Yeah.
I mean, we probably shouldn't wait a week. It's this is what always happens, because I'm like, oh, I don't need to put it out this week, and then it's the one day I don't. It was like, where is it? I was like, well, I guess it's a good thing. It's a good thing that people are asking for the newsletter.
Yeah, that means that our newsletter is cool and it has good content that people look forward to reading each week. And that's one thing I like about our newsletter, because sometimes newsletters are just ads for whatever the product is. But I mean, don't forget. Look, there's ads in it. I'm not going to lie. I mean, there's ads. I didn't say it doesn't have any. Oh yeah,
no, we have some, but
it's not just ads.
Yeah, we try to have we try to actually put content in there. And I'll tell you a secret. We might reuse that content. Ooh. This one nice thing is that newsletter can be used as a jumping off point for other.
Well, I'll be more explicit. We are explicitly putting Itheria content into your monsters. Now, whether it's exactly those things in the newsletter or not, you're gonna have to read and find out.
Yeah, like it serves a double purpose, because it allows us to slowly develop for the books, and actually also develop for the newsletter, and at least gives us a jumping off point. Even if it's not used exactly, you could at least have something that you can use for the lore, if we're not using the original lore, or the sidebar, which is those we have to write. Well, the sidebars we all write. Those are not written by the authors, unfortunately. So Octopath Traveler, yep. Octopath Traveler is pretty good.
I got stuck in Octopath Traveler like a couple years ago. I need to go back to it. I was in a place I was rampantly not supposed to be, while being under-leveled by like 40 levels. And there's this lady who was like some kind of a Valkyrie or something, who was ridiculously strong and unlocked an advanced class. And I kept almost beating her, even though I was rampantly not supposed to be there, to the point where I was like, I want to win this. I don't want to get the 40 levels I'm supposed to have. I want it. And then I quit. I didn't. And I got frustrated. I stopped playing, and I should come back and figure it out.
Was long. Like, that's the thing. It's like, it was very samey and very grindy. And I got to about 40 hours in, and it just felt like this one thing you have to do is, in really good games, is you have to change the tone. You got to start, you got to change the tone. You can't keep exactly the same thing. And things like 13 Sentinels does that. Things like, I'm just looking at my games, Xenoblade Chronicles does that. What else do I have? Triangle Strategy. Ooh, Triangle Strategy. Talk about a game that's the worst opening I've ever seen. It's like,
no,
5 hours of the most boring opening in history, and then the game gets fantastic. It's such a good story. It's like, you really got to slog through that thing.
I feel like one of the things that makes Octopath a little weaker than it could be, even though it has a lot of potential,
like 8 stories that have nothing
is
to do
also
with
the fact. I mean, you could do a lot of things with 8 stories.
Yeah, I know, but they don't intersect. They don't intersect.
Yes, exactly. The fact that the only intersections are at certain points, if you have the right person that you might not know, you can press a button and see a small side conversation.
That's why
there should have been a more involved intersection about it. Like, the people who obviously would have an issue with what's going on in this story, if they're in your party, should like speak up and like change what happens based on if you brought
that's why I say, if you like Octopath Traveler, play 13 Sentinels instead, because it's 13 characters instead of 8. They all intersect each other. The story is 10 trillion times better. And
so I looked it up.
So good.
I looked it up after you talked about it before, and I'm probably still not going to play it because it seems that some of it takes place during World War II, and I don't play games that take place during World War II.
It does, sort of. It's hard to explain, but it takes place from the Japanese point of view, and it's fascinating.
Well, I'm less likely to play a game that takes place on the Axis side of World War II.
Okay, fair enough.
I don't keep in mind that games anyway.
Yeah, I get it. This actually, it's a very small portion of the game because it takes place in different time periods. So one of the time periods just happens to be in the 40s, and so it's not a spoiler. It starts off the game like that, but it's, I promise you, it's worth it. Like, that game, oh my god. And everyone's like, some people don't like the combat. I actually really like the combat. It's very abstract, but once you get into it, it really gets good. It took me a while because it's all abstracted. It's like boxes and triangles, and you're like, why am I seeing like actual fighting? And it's just like, but after a while, it's theater of the mind, man. Like, you can figure out, like, okay, you know what things are. Like, you actually see what each of these grid-based items are. It's really good. Oh, Live Alive did the multiple stories in Octo. Yeah, but Live Alive, I don't know. I didn't like the combat system, and it felt very stale. I couldn't get into it. But I do know supposedly there's the 8 stories, and they all intersect with each other and do something really cool. So I might have an issue with that. I don't know. I might try it again.
Like Saga Frontier or some of the Saga games sometimes had multiple characters that intersected, and they intersected in interesting ways. Even though the stories were very independent, you could find some of the other PCs on your story, and sometimes they would even be like more involved.
Triangle Strategy is really good. Triangle Strategy, I guarantee this is going to happen. You're going to download it. It is, okay, this is the best analogy. If you read Game of Thrones, not watched the show, read the book, and you were like, oh my god, what is happening? Like, you literally have to continuously go back to the index.
So I actually did read only Game of Thrones. Right. Did not read any of the rest of them except maybe I think the prologue to the second book, just to make sure. I did not watch the show because I did not like the first book of Game of Thrones. But I understood everything that was happening.
Oh no, you can understand it, but they just throw the names at you, and they just assume you know who everyone is. And you literally, I remember when I read it, I had to go back to the front to literally say, okay, who's this? And you constantly are doing that. That's how Triangle Strategy starts. It literally says, here's 3 kingdoms, here's everyone in the kingdom, go. And you have to spend 3 to 5 hours to figure out who everyone is.
I'm cool with that.
Then it gets good, and then you start.
Cool with that.
I mean, it's worth it.
Whatever
really
genre
good.
it is, the series that has like 40 characters and no one can remember who all of them are, those are like usually my favorite.
That's like the Suikoden series.
But I'm not even saying that there have to be 40 playable characters. I mean, when there's a lot of characters doing things in the storyline, that usually means it's more intricate, and I like
there's
it.
40 characters.
I still don't like Game of Thrones, but no,
you would
not
like Triangle Strategy. Gets really good. It really gets good, and I was flying through it. I'm at the very end, and then Xenogears.
I wonder if Triangle Strategy will go on a big sale on Steam or something like that.
It's only out on Switch.
Oh yeah, that's an issue.
It's made by
the problem
Octopath
is that they're
people.
from the people who did Bravely Default and Octopath, and they rarely. Those are on Steam now, but they rarely do sales. I have Bravely Default and Octopath, but they rarely do sales.
Oh.
I usually get games like a while after they come out when they're on sale because I'm used to game designer purchasing habits from Paizo.
Well,
but now that I'm at Roll for Comment, I could afford to get Triangle Strategy.
Okay, fine. Suikoden has 108 characters. The other one, if you play, is
the 108 Stars of Destiny, right?
Chrono Trigger also has like 50 characters, or 52.
Oh, you mean Chrono Cross?
Chrono Cross, yeah, Chrono Cross. I love Chrono Cross.
Chrono Cross has like 50 characters.
Yeah. Chrono Cross is good. I like that one more than Chrono Trigger.
I felt like Chrono Cross was a good game that was a terrible sequel.
Oh, it was
a terrible sequel to
game.
Chrono Trigger. It was probably even better if you hadn't played Chrono Trigger, because the only thing it did is like kind of like rained on your parade if you liked Chrono Trigger at all, by being just like all the characters you liked died to these wimpy things while you weren't paying attention and were incompetent. We'll show the last surviving one being killed too. But like, so it's not great as a sequel, but it is just independently a good game. And the amount that I disliked it when I played it, I don't think it deserved.
Did you play Bravely Second, Mark? Bravely, what was the first one? Bravely.
I played Bravely Default.
Bravely Default. God,
I've not hated
Bravely Default. I hated it.
So I played Bravely Default, and I beat it. But to explain the amount, just how much of a percentage of the game I've not played would spoil the game by a huge amount. So I will just say that it was so blazingly obvious to me, the thing that's supposed to be a surprise, that I immediately did the thing to trigger the secret earlier ending. Apparently there was a lot of the game. I did it the moment you could do it by accident. And there's apparently a lot of the game I didn't play. Bravely Second, I played some of it, but I wound up, I don't know why, I wound up getting stuck in the middle, or just like, I stopped playing Bravely Second, where I don't remember where I was. It was partway through. So I should go back and maybe do what you're supposed to do in Bravely Default and actually play the whole thing instead of winning it the first possible moment. But I really can't describe that any further than I did, because it's like probably the largest possible spoiler.
That's all I can tell you.
It doesn't break the game because they let you do it. They let you do the thing that that causes you to go to end game super early. So it's not, they anticipated it as a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
Steven, you probably, I mean, have you played through all of Bravely Default, or you just didn't like it, so you put it down?
No, I just didn't like it. I didn't like.
But if you did, you would, just based on your style of just not listening to people, you would probably have also triggered the early ending.
Maybe. I don't know what type of games I like. I am doing what you did, is that I have so many games that I have decided I'm not buying anymore until I finish.
Yeah, that's sort of what I did, unless they're on a ridiculous sale that I know that it'll be worth it.
Unless I really wanted, like, but like anything, because there's a lot of games I see, I'm like, oh, that's cool, and then I buy it and I never play it. So like this, I really wanted Xenoblade. I do want the new God of War. I loved God of War. I played it through twice, so I will play that. I'm gonna get that. I think that's it. I think that's all I have for this year. That's like my only.
There are a lot of RPGs that I really need to finish.
Well, I still haven't finished Cold Steel, so
I haven't. Like, and we have Cold Steel 2 and 3.
I have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and I'm at the very end of 1. And
we may have 4. I can't remember because people got us 3 and or 4 as gifts. So I can't remember which ones they got.
I
don't even know how many of them we have, and I like the Trail series a lot. But what happened was that I was playing Cold Steel 1, and I'm really, really close to the end. Like, I'm at the part where you go to avoid spoilers, you go to a bunch of different places in the world. I'm at the part where you go to the lab, which I'm pretty sure is the last one.
I'm right up to that too, and that's as far right. You know when you're up to the end, because also it's the end of the school year, so you're like right at the end.
You're getting close to the end of the school year, and I was at that part, and I was playing it like on a trip. The problem that happened was that I at the time, since it was portable, so I saved it for when I couldn't play the games that were not portable, when I needed a portable, and then I suddenly stopped going on trips. And so I also had paused for so long that I was like, oh, but I can't even remember what I was doing. You pause
for so long and then you don't remember what the hell you were doing.
Yeah.
That actually happened to me. Is that I played it and I haven't played it in like a year, and I picked it up. I was like, oh, what was I doing? And then
I need to, because I had like weird combat styles that I always develop weird combat styles and strategies that I'm using usually to go into areas I'm not supposed to be in, or that are higher level or on a very high difficulty mode. And that this causes me a serious problem when I come back to it later.
I'm going to be very disciplined. I'm going to finish Xenoblade, and then after I finish that, I'm going to finish Triangle, and then I'll see where I'm at. Probably by then, Gods of War 2 will come out, and then I'll play that. Sounds good. All right. We should go.
Bye, everybody. We will catch you next week for the